Thank you, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us at our 2014 Legislative Candidate Forum. Format for this evening, I'm going to try to read this without my glasses and ask the questions of the candidates. We have 3 questions for the candidates this evening. They're going to give their responses and then a closing statement on why they feel they're the best person for the job and why they deserve your vote in November. So, one thing I ask of the audience, the candidates are here, they're going to answer our questions. Please, no hooping, no hollering. This is a time when I am looking for crickets from the crowd. So at this point, I'd like to get started, and we do have from House District 6, Carl Glemm. Carl, good evening, and thank you for agreeing to appear with us this evening.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
We have a few questions today for you that revolve around only a few of the key issues we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get an insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizenry. First, you're aware that the city of Kalispell has adopted a legislative agenda platform, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Given that, what items from our agenda do you think you can assist with, and how will you work with the city of Kalispell so local objectives can be met?
Can you go through a list of those?
Yes. Essentially, what we were looking at, City of Kalispell is basically would like the opportunity for other cities within the state of Montana to look at the option on a local option sales tax. We have concerns regarding increasing regulations and the ability for our city, our municipality to fund those regulations, so basically unfunded mandates from regulatory authorities. We're looking at other issues related to tax increment financing. We don't want to see the laws there change, as well as special districts. We'd like to see special district rules expanded back to the way they used to be.
Okay. I guess the number of those issues deal with funding, and one of them, the local option sales tax, is available to smaller cities in the state, and looking to increase that is, in my opinion, is kind of it's a tough sell, I think, really, because the people are going to have to pay those taxes. It's a tax increase, and it's a new tax. And the problem with sales tax in the state of Montana is that unless you get rid of something else, all those taxes just creep up, and you keep getting more and more and more of each item, and there's never any relief there, because nothing is completely wiped out. When you move that into Kalispell, people do a lot of shopping in Kalispell. You're going to drive that out of town, is what's going to happen. More to the internet. You're probably going to hurt local businesses. I realize that people want to get the tourists, but you're also going to get the locals, and they're the ones that are trying to make a living here and trying to live here. Tax increment financing is an interesting. It came out of California. They don't do it anymore. But tax increment financing can shift some of the things that the city takes some of that money that you're getting when the properties are increased in value, and you take that money and you set it aside for something special. A lot of times you will borrow against that. Oh,
you're 2 minutes.
Way too long. Sorry.
So, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, one of the items we didn't get to address there is a city, basically the standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as it pertains to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost to meet these requirements. And it only appears that cities are being held responsible to meet these requirements, is the other thing that we've seen in our research. Do Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal levels are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what will you do in Helena to help us with these issues?
I will do everything I can to help keep those costs down. And first thing I want to say is that people live here because they love it here. And part of the reason that we love it here is because we have clean air and clean water. Everybody wants clean air and clean water. But there are ways to do that reasonably and efficiently and effectively. Those are what we need to be working for there. You're exactly right. From the feds, we're getting a lot more overreach and a lot more dictation of what we should do and how we should do it, and micromanaging. And some of that is trickling down into the state too, I believe. And they want to have their fingers in more of it. I know that the stormwater stuff is something that they're really fighting with a lot of cities about right now. I think that we need to work to keep our waters clean, but we need to be efficient and effective at it too. And that doesn't mean that we have to pick the most expensive avenue that there is to do that. So I guess that pretty well wrapped that. I cut it down, so I thought I'd be shorter at that time.
Okay, I'm going to return back to the local option sales tax real quick.
Okay.
As it currently sits in the state of Montana, resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents have the option to explore whether or not they want to institute a local option sales tax. These communities have the ability to set the sideboards. They can set basically how they want their regulation to work. Some of these, we look to the north, city of Whitefish, there is a give back to the local residents on the real estate tax side. Would you be supportive of advancing a law that allowed cities with certain guidelines to look at that option?
So it's really hard to speak on specifics when you don't see the whole bill, but so what about people that don't live in the city? How are you going to give back to them? Because there's a lot of surrounding community. I mean, the city of Kalispell is fairly compact and contiguous, but as you expand out, all those people are coming into Kalispell to buy things too. And so are those county residents being subject to that? Because is there a way to give back to them when they buy stuff?
Much like when you go to Whitefish, yes. But there is no way to give back to the county residents. They contribute to the infrastructure that they're utilizing in that community.
Right. So they're not
given a tax rebate.
They're not given the tax rebate. Right. So similarly, I mean you're gonna drive those people away from shopping in the city of Kalispell.
Okay. Great. Well, I want to thank you for answering the questions this evening. The insight that we gain as we have these conversations is tremendous. Now I'll give you 1 minute in closing to address your constituents and ask for the vote.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time tonight, and the reason I'm running for House District 6 is because I have 2 little kids and I'm worried about what we're leaving for them, for our kids. I grew up in Montana and went to school here, and I'd like for my kids to be able to go here and go to school and get out and get a good job. I think we need to, keep Montana a lot more like it was when I was a kid, and that's a lot of why I'm running. When I'm there, I'm always looking out for the taxpayer. I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and what we do is a state budget, and you've got everybody up there asking for money, and I question that every time because it's the taxpayers' money, and we are the only ones that are there for you. The people that are up at the podium asking for more money are looking to spend more of your money. So we look to try and make it the best use we can. And I thank you for your time. I appreciate your vote in November. Thank you.
Great. Carl, thank you. Appreciate you spending the evening with us.
You bet.
Okay. Now we have Dave Fischlowitz with us. Dave, thank you for joining us, and good evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We have a few questions today for you that revolve around a few of the key issues that we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get an insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizens. First, you're aware that the city of Kalispell has adopted a legislative agenda platform, correct?
Yes.
If so, of the various items from that agenda, what items do you think you can assist with, and how will you work with the city of Kalispell so local objectives can be met?
Well, from looking at the agenda, I think that to be able to achieve the goals, if we're looking at specific goals for whatever tax tools we might want to pull out of the toolbox, I think that if the goals are clear and that they're assessed in a fair and equitable way, and that the measures are clear of the accomplishment of the goals, I favor local citizens' ability to choose how and when they would be taxed.
Okay. Second, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as it pertains to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we are approaching a point where we are reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. And it appears that only cities are being held responsible to meet these standards. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what will you do in Helena to help us with these issues?
I think that as special situations appear, as it seems that this local municipal wastewater treatment may be, that we really need to look to the diplomacy and ambassadorship of not just our elected officials, but the economic development people and authorities in our communities, and that there's a great deal that we can gain from putting the right people in a room together, brainstorming solutions. And I think that there's a great deal that can be accomplished in a mediative effort.
Okay, collaboration. Okay. Okay, the last question we have for you is about taxation. Right now, there are a few communities in Montana that have been given the ability to determine for themselves as communities whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure needs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents. Given the limited ability for local governments to grow revenue and alleviate property tax increases, in the face of increasing demands for service, especially on the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving the communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution for funding infrastructure costs? Please explain.
In my conversations with people at the doors of their homes and in their businesses particularly, I've had a very consistent response. Particularly the business people in House District 6, I have not found opposed to a local area sales tax, and 4% seems to be a reasonable number, and caps in place are a very important feature of this kind of legislation, and I think that it would be effective in the accomplishment of what we all want is good property values, and those are supported by quality schools and connected green space, and that the local area sales tax could go to work for those kinds of community resources.
Okay. I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are a couple of important issues that you've addressed, and we appreciate your candor. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Well, it is my strong opinion that I'm only able to do the job of House District Representative by actually going around and speaking with business owners and the residents in the district and carrying forward their experiences, their feelings, and their thoughts. And it is on that basis that I've reached out to the voters in House District 6, and that's what I plan to go to Helena with.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck in November. Mr. Gardner is with us, and he is running for House District 7. He's a Republican running for that House district. Frank, good evening, and thank you for agreeing to appear with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
We have a few questions today for you that revolve around a few of the key issues that we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get insight into your thoughts and opinions on these topics so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizens. First, you're aware the city of Kalispell has adopted a legislative agenda platform, correct?
Yes.
If so, of the various items from the agenda, which ones do you think you can assist with, and how will you work with the city of Kalispell so local objectives can be met?
Well, I think to begin with, this isn't my first time in this chamber or in this building. I grew up in Kalispell. I worked for the city of Kalispell. I've volunteered in this community for many years, and I'm blessed to have a lot of good relationships inside our community that I think can help me better understand what the needs of the people are. I've knocked on a lot of doors during the course of this year, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people, and I got to tell you, they've been really gracious and really forthcoming. So I think to start with, what I can do to help is bring my experience, both in the private sector and public sector, as a businessman and as a person who's helped be an administrator on the local government level, to assist that relationship between the state and the city in benefiting the people of Kalispell.
Okay. And second, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as it pertains to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what do you plan to do in Helena to help us with these issues?
Well, I think, first of all, that the regulations are in place for a reason. And I think it's important for us to make sure that we're being good stewards of public land, the water. And so I think it has to be based on science and not convenience. And so I think the science is what guides us. And I think we can take a look at, both at the state and local level, at what those appropriate levels are based on what the science is, and apply that to what these discharge levels are. I wish I could tell you that I'm qualified as a scientist to tell you that, but what I am qualified to do is to tell you that I think I'm a good problem solver, and I'm the kind of person that can sit down and listen to what the evidence is and make adjustments if necessary without selling the farm, without putting our environment in danger, and put us in a place where we'll be better off because we have those municipal services available to people.
The last question we have for you is about taxation. Right now, there's a few communities in Montana that have been given the ability to determine for themselves whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure needs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents. Given the limited ability for local governments to grow revenue and alleviate property, and in the face of increasing demands for service, especially on the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving other communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution for funding infrastructure?
I think there are two important things to look at when we talk about local option sales tax. And I think first is whose decision it should be. And I think the person over on 4th Avenue West is better prepared to decide how they should be taxed, what they should spend their money on. I think that person should be vested in the right to decide their own future. I think it makes more sense to have a person sitting in Kalispell make that decision than it does the person in Ekalaka. And by that I mean, if it's strictly controlled at the state level, we're going to have people on the east side of the mountains making decisions for us on the west side. I think local control, the lower level we can make that decision, the better. I'd rather see that decision made by the taxpayer than I would an elected official from somewhere else in the state. Now, having said that, I think the reservation is, and what I think the city of Kalispell has to be careful with, is that it has a large business district around it, and it has to be careful that it doesn't apply taxes and fees to make itself less competitive in this local market. So while I think it's better to have that local control, my reservation is for those people who, if given that decision, make that decision, that they make it with that thought in mind. Kalispell isn't the only business district in our area.
Okay. Frank, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. The candor has been wonderful. Please give a short answer, a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents in November.
Okay. So I think I've told a lot of folks this before, and you know, my old job, I always said you got a lot more with a smile and a gun than just a smile. Now I'm just working with the smile. And so what I want to do is bring my experience as a public servant, somebody who's been involved in Rotary, Lions, Big Brothers and Sisters, private business. I want to bring that to the city of Kalispell, and I want to help represent the city and those folks in House District 7, all the way over to Willow Glen in the state legislature. I think I'm a good problem solver, and I think I understand a lot of what some of the issues are. I'm concerned about education and unemployment in our economy. I think if we do a really good job of making sure that we educate our kids well, provide a good environment for business to thrive in, I think businesses will rush to be here and employ our kids instead of us shipping them outside the area. I want my kids and your kids to have the same opportunities we had growing up here. And I'm concerned with the direction of some of our policies that they aren't going to have that opportunity. That's why I threw my hat in the ring. And that's why I'm asking people to vote for me, because I think I'm going to be a good representative for Kalispell, and that I understand what the needs of the citizens here and the folks in House District 7 are.
Thank you. Frank, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Good luck. Great. We have with us Lynn Stanley from House District 8, running for, as a Democrat, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. I apologize, my glasses just broke, so I am trying to scramble and read from afar. We have a few questions for you today that revolve around a few of the key issues we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena and how they will impact our citizenry. First, you're aware the city of Kalispell has adopted a legislative agenda platform, correct?
Right.
If so, what items from our agenda do you think you can assist with, and how will you work with the city of Kalispell so local objectives can be met?
Well, one of the main things that I saw in your agenda that was interesting was the local option sales tax. And I did some homework on that. I found the rule on it has been, it's been a resort tax, and for communities 5,500 and under. So to try and balance the impacts of a large influx of people coming to visit when your population is small and you can't address the infrastructure impacts of all those visitors. So Kalispell is considerably more populous than 5,500. We're over 19,000, I think. And I looked up, we are actually the 7th largest city in Montana, and there are 15 cities that are over 5,500. So one of my questions is actually, is this something that's approved by the state on a city-by-city basis, or is the rule that's made then affect the whole state? And if Kalispell got a resort tax, or a local option tax, would it then be available to all the cities in Montana? And if it comes to that, I really think that we ought to, perhaps as a state, look over our tax structure. Part of the way that a local option tax is used is to provide property tax relief to residents of the city. And
Close real quick.
okay, so that's something that we ought to examine in that context.
So we're giving 2 minutes, so.
Sure.
Second, one of the other issues that we're required, or that we wrestle with, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality as it relates and pertains to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize and we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what will you do in Helena to help with this issue?
Well, my first comment about that is when it comes to wastewater treatment, is that Kalispell, as I understand it, has built a wastewater treatment plant that's pretty state-of-the-art, even nationally. And so it would seem that that regulation, if you are so above and beyond requirements, that would not be such an issue when it comes to wastewater. But I think we always need to be balancing those regulations with the condition that the city is in. If the city has a pretty clean environment, then perhaps there ought to be some balancing there. But in the main, I think that our Constitution, our Montana Constitution, has a clean air and clean water component to it, and we ought to honor that in the kind of regulation that we have. So as the city grows, I think it's incumbent upon it to find tools for financing whatever it takes to meet that regulation.
Okay. I'm going to go back and loop back because I want to do 3 questions with you. On the local option sales tax, when we look at that, what restrictions would you like to see written into any law that would allow local municipalities to pass a local option sales tax?
Well, the city would have to show how it wanted to allocate that tax. For instance, in Whitefish, 65% is allocated to roads and related infrastructure, 5% is for bike paths and park improvements, and 25% goes to property tax relief. So Kalispell would have to think about how they are going to allocate the revenues from such a tax. And then it would have to, the tax would have to be on specific things. We shouldn't be taxing, it should be discretionary tax, not a necessities tax, to make sure it's not regressive.
And then I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are a couple issues that are important, and we appreciate your candor. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from all of our constituents in November.
Well, before I do that, I just want to thank the City Council for all the work you do. The legislators go to work for 4 months very hard and may attend committee meetings the rest of the time, but city councils go year in and week in and week out. year in and year out, and I think they perform a great service. I think that the strength I would bring to our legislature is a desire to keep an open mind, a desire to look for common ground, and a desire to negotiate balanced solutions that are right for us in Montana. So it's a preference I have for problem solving over partisanship, and that's why I would encourage people to consider voting for me.
Thank you,
Thank
Len.
you.
Good luck in November.
Thank
Okay. I'd like to welcome Randy Brodell, candidate for House District 9 as a Republican. Randy, thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate you attending.
You bet, thank you.
We have a few questions for you this evening that revolve around a couple of the key issues that we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics so we can understand how you might make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizenry. First, you're aware that we have adopted a legislative agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If so, what items from the agenda do you think you can assist with, and how will you work with the city of Kalispell so local objectives can be met?
Can you brief me on those objectives?
Yeah, real quick. Local option sales tax is one thing that we would look to explore. Not necessarily saying we're a proponent, but we want to see the ability for us to, at least the voters, to examine that.
Okay.
Tax increment financing, as a financing tool, we'd like to see that tool in place and not messed with in Helena.
Right.
Third item would be special districts. We'd like to see the rules eased back to the way they used to be in special districts so they're easier for us to form. And then the other would be environmental issues that we have with over-regulation or basically unfunded mandates with environmental regulations.
Okay, the first one that we talked about was local option sales tax. Where I am with that, and I'm very familiar with that because Whitefish has that, and as many of you know, they've had that for probably 8 years or so. It's been pretty successful there. As a legislator, the concern for me is, do we want to grow that? Do we want to grow that across the state to cities of, say, 10,000, or do we want to unrestrict that? It's got some value for the city. It also has some things that come with it. One of the things that comes with that is, what do we do with the landlord gets the relief from that, but what about the renters? And there's some things that are going to need to be addressed by the cities when they bring that up, so that we have a balanced approach of how that money is taken. Because right now, let's say we have a guy that goes in and he buys products in Whitefish and he pays his 2%, but he lives there. And so now he will get that back if he's a homeowner, but he won't get that back as a renter unless his landlord chooses to drop his rent. So that's something I would really like the city to consider when they're looking at legislation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another issue that we
You want me
addressed.
to go through the rest of them?
No, I'm trying to do 2 minutes, and we'll go back and we can come back.
Okay.
So, second, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality as it pertains to wastewater
Right.
and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize we need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? What can you do in Helena to help with this issue?
Well, I think we're talking about TMDLs, and that's basically how many pollutants go through the system each day and wind up in Flathead Lake. In particular, that's what we're dealing with here in the valley. And so there's kind of two ways that happens. One is point source, which is the end of a pipe where it comes out, and the other is maybe from a field or a group of fields that are running into a particular drainage. And so we have all of that. That's called a non-point source because it's not coming right out of a pipe. Okay, it's coming from a larger area. The DEQ, EPA have wanted to target the point source or the pipe where it comes out because they're easier to regulate than going to the farmers and saying, hey, you can't put fertilizer on your field today because it's supposed to rain tonight. We may see that washing in. Those are the kind of things that the cities are going to be looking at because EPA, DEQ finds it very difficult to regulate farms, regulate septic systems, because there is no oversight of those, okay? So when you come in with legislation as a city, make sure you're trying to identify ways that would balance that out. So it's not just the cities getting hit, it's not just the agriculture folks getting hit or the septic systems, but include that because it's going to be a big picture for the legislature to look at.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to loop back to the local option sales tax. And as you described before, you have some of the concerns. What restrictions? So if the state were to allow local municipalities the opportunity to evaluate whether or not they believe a local option sales tax is appropriate, what sideboards, what regulations would you like to have, would you like to see in that law to prevent abuse?
Well, I think really it comes back to, like I was saying earlier, it looks good really up front because we target the people that are coming through that are using our services, our city municipalities' services, but are only paying kind of around, they're paying it through the different vendors. And that means they have to stop, they have to spend money, and then the vendor makes up those costs. That's it. The $64 question is how do we make sure that we do this equally? And it's going to be tough. And Mark, I just don't, I don't know that I could pin it down exactly because we've been looking at this for a lot of years. And I don't know that there's a good way to expand the local option tax. I'm not sure that there's a good way to say, Kalispell, you can do this too, without having a negative impact on the guy that's already trying to make sure he's got enough money to pay for his groceries at the end of the day. And generally that is not a homeowner. And that's the people that we're impacting in the most negative way with the local option tax.
Thank you. Randy, we want to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are a couple of important issues that we've addressed, and we appreciate your candor. As we know, these are difficult questions, difficult topics. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Well, I think many of the folks in this room, I see lots of familiar faces. Many of you know me. Many of you know my wife Joyce, who's sitting in the back here. You know that we're a conservative family. Some of you may know our kids and our grandkids. We look for ways to restrict how much government reaches into your home and takes something out of your pocket or changes how you want to be as a family. We look for ways to do that. We look for ways to keep the government out of your pocketbook. Now, there's things the government is designed to do. There's things that the Constitution allows. And again, if you know me, you know that I believe in the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Montana. I am here to do everything I can to make sure that we live by those documents because I believe they're as relevant today as they were when they were created.
Perfect timing.
Okay?
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you
Good
very
luck in
much.
November.
Okay,
Jolene,
yes,
welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
thank you.
We have a couple of questions that we want to go through with you this evening that are important topics to the city of Kalispell and our constituents. We want to understand your thoughts and your beliefs, so when you get to Helena, we can understand how you might vote and
Okay.
how that may impact our citizenry. So, oops, I'm getting into my document, so bear with me 2 seconds. Merry Christmas. Okay. First, you're aware the city of Kalispell has adopted a legislative agenda, correct?
Okay, yes, I saw,
Okay. If so, What items from that agenda do you think you can assist us with, and how can you work with the city of Kalispell so we can meet our local objectives?
Well, I think one of the ideas is the impact fees, the legislation. And I think you as a city council have been really upfront with the focus of impact fees, and that's growth should pay for growth. And I think that the city has a right to say up front what is expected of the developers, including appropriate studies that would deal with potential problems and also safety issues. And I think, you already have a lot in place there, and I would think that, whatever you're looking for in the future, that you'll be able to carry on.
Okay, thank you. Second, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as it pertains to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what can you do in Helena to help us with this issue?
Environmental quality is really an important issue, and I think what you had stated in your legislative lists, the unfounded liability caused by increased and excessive regulatory standards dealing with water and water treatment was a concern that I had. I attended the Flathead Regional Wastewater Management Public Information meeting last week and learned that really the city government has a very good treatment plant in place, I understand, and I know the other cities are working on it, and I know it's been a tremendous financial burden. Part of the problem, I understand, is the septic systems that are around. And I think we need to keep in mind that Flathead Lake matters when we're dealing with wastewater and runoffs. So I feel that once these regulations are in place, there must have been a reason that they were there to keep the water quality high. And I would feel that it's a public health issue. And to do anything with those standards might not be where you really want to go.
Okay. The last question we have for you is about taxation. Right now, there are a few communities in Montana that have been given the ability to determine for themselves, as communities, whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure needs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with a population under 5,500 residents. Given the limited ability of the local governments to grow revenue and alleviate, and in the face of increasing demands for service, especially on the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving other communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution for funding infrastructure costs?
I would need to see some specifics as to what a bill in the legislature would look like. Would there be revenue sharing with the county? What would be the assessment? What would the taxes be levied? What would we be paying taxes on? And there should be public debate concerning local optional sales tax. I feel that it is a regressive tax. People who are on a limited income, low income, they're paying a much higher percentage than other people. So I think that really needs to be studied before the issue is brought to the people to vote on. In a recent study that I read, the Wallet Hub study said that Montana is one of the best places as far as the tax system, and that was based on the fact that we do not have a sales tax. And in that study also, it stated that Montana had the 7th best tax climate for businesses. So I don't know if it's productive to really look at a local option sales tax.
Okay. I want to thank you for joining us this evening, Jolynn, and answering our questions. These are a couple of important issues that we look at as a city council, and we appreciate your candor. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents in November.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk. I was born and raised here in the valley, and I've seen Kalispell grow on all four sides. And, our stately courthouse is something that we're very proud of, and I appreciate the fact that the Central School Museum is very instrumental in keeping the history alive in this area. And looking at the current and future Kalispell, we realize we are in transition with the bypass construction. The roundabouts do not bother me. However, I do have to admit the street behind around Glacier High School and around Costco and Lowe's is something that I'm very uncomfortable driving around. It's just really hard to figure out where I'm supposed to be going. And the council now has listed some 5 financial options relating to the areas of the municipal operations. And it is my hope that the goals of the city council will be making a place here in Kalispell a place that we're proud of as far as businesses and residents. I do believe it's more cost-effective to prevent problems than to fix them. So going down to Helena and trying to find ways to reduce regulations, I think you need to consider that, as maybe not the route to go.
Great.
Okay.
Jolynn, thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck in November.
Thank you.
Thanks. We have a few questions today for you that revolve around a few of the key issues we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you might make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizens. First, you're aware the city of Kalispell has adopted a legislative agenda? Okay. If so, what items from our agenda do you think that you can assist with, and how will you work with the city of Kalispell so local objectives can be met?
And this was with regard to the,
Yeah, I'll get the items: local option sales
Yes,
tax,
right.
tax increment financing.
yes,
Special districts, environmental issues, and then impact fee
Right.
regulations.
all right. So I'll try to briefly just address each one of those.
Or a couple of them real quick.
A couple of them.
2
Okay.
minutes.
2 minutes, right there. I don't favor local option sales tax because I think that there needs to be a comprehensive sales tax for the whole state rather than a municipality or a county trying to adopt one of those. The sales taxes are divisive in this state, and I don't favor that as a funding mechanism. I know it's an easy solution. Whitefish has one, and you know that I was on the council up there. And theirs was the resort tax, but when it came time to renew, they were, well, let's raise it, or let's add more things. And I think that's the tendency when you get to a more local one, and you have less people and more government types that are going to try to set a policy like that. So I don't favor a local. I think that should be a state, and we all know that the state voters have turned that down several times, so I wouldn't go there to allow a local option tax for municipalities. I think you mentioned the impact fees. I am an advocate of impact fees, and I think the state has made it cumbersome. And I've been on committees here in the county trying to get impact fees implemented. I know that the city has done it. We worked on them up in Whitefish. They're complicated, and I don't think it has to be that complicated to administer it or the rules that you have. And it is a way to ask the newcomers to fund the improvements so that we can have growth. I hardly think it's fair to put in an extension of sewer or build new roads. They're very expensive. And then the general taxpayers pay that, and many of them don't even want to see development occurring. But when it does happen, those who are benefiting the most are the people who are going to get a sewer line out to their house so that they can put a development in. So making the rules, they're very complicated, I think, right now for establishing a committee and identifying, identifying the places.
Okay, great. Second, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as it pertains to wastewater and stormwater discharge.
Yes.
We fully recognize we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost.
Right.
Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what can you do in Helena to help cities with these issues?
All right. I think there's not enough attention being paid to what I call, I guess it would be the non-source pollution. What you have in the city is the users, they're watering their lawns, and this is where a lot of the problems come, is the kind of stuff that's getting dumped into your sewer drains, or I'm sorry, not your wastewater drains out in the streets. And when you put in these regulations, it would be great if it was a microcosm that no other pollution is coming in from anywhere. But you can't do that here. You have groundwater, you have artesian water, and this gets polluted from things off-site. If it would be nice if you could just say all to the people in Kalispell, you're not going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to be able to meet those EPA standards. They're very tight. I think it's hard. And so what you do is you put onto the burden of a city what I think is impossible to meet. Whitefish had a hard time, and they aren't. They're in the same position as you are here, having to allow for what happens off-site and comes into your water system, comes into your water plant, and when it comes out of yours, of course, the state's now regulating what that standard's going to be. And you have to deal with a lot more than just what the people in Kalispell are polluting it with. There's got to be a better way to handle that, and I think they are too strict.
Okay. I'm going to move to a different topic, tax increment financing. It's an important tool for encouraging development and growth within municipalities. Do you believe that state law is too restrictive or too permissive for municipalities?
I don't think it's too permissive. I am a fan of tax increment funding. I think it's a good process for cities. They have to identify the areas that need help, and this is usually roads, sewer, perhaps fixing up buildings. You identify it in a plan, go to the voters, you say, this is what we would like to do in here, and it's a great way to finance some of those things without putting too big of a burden on the municipality itself, because you're using the tax, that difference in taxation. And then I feel that when the tax increment district comes to an end, all of those businesses have benefited. Now, I understand that school districts or any number of people who get taxes don't like this mechanism, but I think a lot of this falls from not enough education to the general public about what a tax increment fund can do for you. And I do think it benefits all of the people that are not only in that area that's marked out, but also those who live in the city of Kalispell. You see improvements in areas that have had a tax increment district put around them. And then when it comes around to renew them, there's all this, they have a misinformation about how those taxes are generated and who's paying them. So I think that's an education thing. And again, I don't think that they are too, they're being too restrictive on it. I think it's a pretty broad thing. If the cities and counties do them correctly, I believe they can be a good mechanism. I don't see something wrong with it right now.
Okay, great. Kim, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are important issues that we address at the city council level, which you well understand.
Right.
Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
I don't have too many of them in the Kalispell area. But I have a lot of experience working in government. I met Mark through some of that government experience up in Whitefish, and I have been on councils. I've been on the planning board. I've served on the county health district here. And I enjoy the give and take that comes from talking to not only the citizens, but the other people who are on committees with me. And I feel like I'm a fair person. I come well prepared to meetings, and I won't back down. Those of you who know me, if I get my education behind me and I say, all right, this is maybe the best plan, bring it out to the public, and I really believe in public involvement. And I think that I can go down there and step right in. I don't have a really good grasp of how government works. And as I say, I enjoy the challenge, and I've got a husband that's supportive. So I'd like the challenge.
Great. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Good
and
enough.
Good luck in November.
All right.
With me now, I have Mark Blaisdell. Mark is a Republican candidate for Senate District 4. Mark, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
We have a few more questions for you this evening, and regarding key issues that we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we can get insight into your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizenry. I'd like to start off on one of our favorite topics, standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as they pertain to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize and want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what can you do in Helena to help us with these issues?
Well, I believe they have gone too far, and I think they've almost got to an unobtainable rate level where a lot of cities can't even perform or keep up with what they're asking, and the cost to the taxpayers is getting so extreme that they're not going to be able to afford it either. I think at the legislature, I think we have to have a strong voice, and we have to push back on the federal regulations. I think we have to start taking a stronger role in the rulemaking process that the DEQ and some of the other agencies do. At this point in time, the agencies don't have to come to the legislature on these rules. I think we have interim committees that meet every 2 to 3 months. I think when it's a rule that is this important and of this much consequence to the citizens of the state and to Kalispell and so forth, they need to be able to come and get an agreement on an equally divided Republican and Democrat interim committee and be able to get it passed there as well before that can go into place.
Okay. The next question I have for you is about taxation, one of our favorite topics. Right now, there are a few communities in Montana that have the ability to determine for themselves as communities whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure needs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents. Given that limited ability for local governments to grow revenue, and in the face of increasing demands for service and infrastructure, especially on the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving other communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution to fund infrastructure costs? Please explain.
As I've stated before, I am not in support of a local option sales tax. I've stated that the state of Montana currently has the third most selective sales taxes of any state in the nation. I think we can revisit the big bill that was passed in 2001, where the state started taking in all the tax revenues and then reallocating it. I think it's time that maybe we can look at how more money is allocated back out to the cities that are paying into it. I think we also need to look at some long-term infrastructure needs, not only on eastern Montana, but on western Montana, and how we can do more. The TSEP project has been a great one that comes off the coal reserves, but it's for very small projects that don't equal what the grasp of what Kalispell and largest communities are doing. And so I think we need to take a look at that for long-term goals.
Okay. Next year, where we have a legislative agenda, some of the other topics on that agenda that we haven't asked questions on, local or other than local option sales tax and the environmental issues, tax increment financing. Do you believe that the state is too restrictive or too permissive in the tax increment financing laws? And do you believe that's a good way for cities to help fund redevelopment?
I think it's been a kind of across the board with good and bad across communities. As I stated before, I think there's cities that have done a great job with tax increment finance districts, and they've set goals, they've established what they want to do, they've been open and honest and transparent with their citizens, and they've moved forward. Where the legislature has stepped in is communities like Billings, where We've seen TIF districts that have become eternal, and we're told that they were going to be 10 to 15 years. Now they're going to 20 and 25, and they're continuing. And so that's where we start seeing taxpayers coming to committees and starting to voice their concerns, and where the legislature starts looking at putting more restrictions in.
Mark, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are important issues that you've addressed, and we appreciate your candor. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Well, thank you, Mayor Johnson, the city councilmen and women, and the city of Kalispell. It's a great opportunity to campaign and ask for your vote in Kalispell. I'm a 4-term state representative and current Speaker of the House. I can walk in on day one and provide the tools necessary to establish the coalitions and be able to get things done in Helena. I'm a small businessman. I know what it's like to sign both sides of a check. I know what government regulations not only do to my business, but how they hurt my employees, and more importantly, how they hurt my customers as well, because I hear each and every day the struggles that they're facing. Those are the mentality that I take down to Helena when I go, and that's how I vote. And I'd ask for your vote on November 4th. If you have any questions, please look at my website, markblaisdell.us, or call me at 261-3269. Thank you.
Mark, thanks for joining us this evening, and good luck in November. With us now, we have Diane Taylor. She is a Democratic candidate for Senate District 4. Good evening, and thank you for agreeing to appear in our forum this evening.
Thank you for having us.
We have a few questions today for you that revolve around a few of the key issues that we face as city officials, or city elected officials. We're asking these questions so we get insight into your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena and how they may impact our citizens. First, I'd like to ask about environmental standards. So we have to, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as they pertain to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize we want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what can you do in Helena to help us, municipalities, with these issues?
Well, I don't exactly know what all of the regulations are, so I can't say whether they've gone too far or not. I do think water is one of our most precious, absolutely necessary for life. So I think it's imperative that we protect it at whatever cost. If the cost is high, then I think what we need to do is find another way to get the money to pay for it. I don't want to see a lot of burden placed on property owners, but there are a lot of people that come to the Flathead Valley from all over the United States, all over the world, and they don't pay anything. They drink our water, they use our sewage systems. There might be a way to have them pay some taxes and support some of the regulations, help us pay for the regulations that we have. I just can't imagine how we cannot take care of water. So, and I have heard that the regulations on the city are more stringent than they are on county residents. And I'm not sure, I don't think that that's fair. I think everybody should step up and realize what we're taking care of, because we won't live without water. You can't, so.
Okay. Next question we have for you is about taxation. Right now, there are a few communities in Montana that have been given the ability to determine for themselves whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure needs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents. Given the limited ability for local governments to grow revenue, and in the face of increasing demands for service, especially on the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving other communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution for funding infrastructure costs.
Yes.
Can you please explain? Yeah. The follow-on.
Well, as I just said, a lot of people come here from all over the world, and they don't pay for the services that they're using. One summer, I worked at the little photo shop outside of West Glacier, and when people would come in and buy something, they would expect to pay the tax, and they would be surprised we didn't have any tax. I think the fact that the local option is going to be voted on by voters, so it isn't just a few people making that decision, I think that's a good feature. I read about that you get to decide what you're taxing, so you would not be taxing essential items. You could set it up so it's only discretionary items, so there would not be a burden on the average citizen. I think it would be a huge source of spreading out the cost of keeping clean water and keeping up the roads, and it could give property tax relief. You'd have more people paying more people in the tax base, so each person would have to pay a little bit less. So yes, I would support it. I would support it. I do think it needs to be tied into a tax break for local people. Either they're exempted from paying the tax, or if you keep state income tax, then maybe they take off an exemption at the end when they're paying taxes for clothing or food, or, well, food wouldn't be taxed, but yes, I think it can be worked out.
Okay. One of the other issues as a city, one of the tools we use is tax increment financing. And these, there have been communities that have it's been led to believe that they've abused tax increment financing. Do you believe tax increment financing rules in Montana are too permissive or too restrictive? And do you support their existence for municipalities to utilize them?
I support tax increment districts. I think as legislators, as elected officials, it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't abuse the laws. And I don't think you should take the law away just because it has been abused. I think you need to check and make sure it's being enforced equitably and fairly and to the letter of the law. I think the tax increment financing allows you to correct blighted areas and bring in growth and bring in more job opportunities. And I just think it's our responsibility to make sure that we do it fairly and within the law. But I don't think you should throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of the possibility of raising taxes and improving an area just because it's someplace it has been abused.
Dan, I want to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are important issues that the cities we have to address and face on a daily basis. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Well, I'm going to thank you for allowing me to be here. These are not questions when you sent it out, the invitation. These weren't issues that I particularly cared about or knew anything about. But I think it's a good eye-opener to what happens if you're going to be a legislator. There's going to be a lot of issues that I don't know about, and this week I've talked to people, I've read articles, I've gone on the internet, I've done a lot of research, and I think that's the criteria that you need a legislator to have. You need to have somebody who's going to go in with an open mind, get as much information as they can, make a decision that's going to be the most benefit for the most people with the least amount of harm. And I think I'm somebody that can do that. I'm very, very open-minded. I'm very, I don't have any preconceived ideas. Thank you.
Great. Dan, thank you.
Oh, thank
good
you
luck in
so
November.
much.
With me now is Bob Keenan. He is a Republican candidate for Senate District 5. Bob, good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Mark, good to meet you.
We have a few questions for you today that revolve around a few of the key issues we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we get insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena that could impact our citizenry. The first item I want to talk about are environmental standards. As you know, as a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as they pertain to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize and we want to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what can you do in Helena to help us with this issue?
First of all, a quick answer, I think that the regulations are approaching going too far. I'm on the Big Fork County Water and Sewer District Board, and we are continually getting new regulations that are very costly for us. We have a state-of-the-art facility for sewer mitigation and a discharge permit into the lake. And the EPA sets the regulations, they come to the DEQ, and then they come to us. They are getting to the point where our taxpayers are being heavily burdened by us. What can I do, and I get to Helena? I think the best thing is communication. It is talking to DEQ, representing this district, and trying to express to them the financial cost, the environmental purity that they're looking for is fine. We all like to have that. But at what point does it become more costly than it is effective for the taxpayers? And I think the communication between the city, I spent 12 years in the legislature, and I'm a budget guy. I'm not a tax committee person. So most of the tax issues I'd look for people to help me with. And I think that lacked in the years that I was in Helena, that I never heard from anybody in the Kalispell City Council. I represented a rural area. This time with, it has changed so that we're now into Evergreen and then around the hospital and down towards the fairgrounds. So I have a different constituency that includes Kalispell. That's why I'm here tonight. But it's important, I think, for the Kalispell City Council individually to educate us, who are ordinary citizens going down to Helena.
Which is why you're seeing this council more actively engaged at this point in time.
Here we are.
Interesting segue into taxation. Right now, there are a few communities in Montana that have been given the ability to determine for themselves as communities whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure costs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents. Given the limited ability for local governments to grow revenue, and in the face of increasing demands for service and infrastructure needs, especially on the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving other communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution to funding infrastructure costs? Please explain.
I have been involved in this. I think that the expansion of the local option tax came before us in the legislature. And I think I have a long voting record against allowing for a local option sales tax. I've known for about a month now that this forum was going to happen, so when I've met the people that live in Kalispell and I've approached them about sales tax, those are two dirty words for people. And I have not had any support. A lot of people have more questions than they do anything else, but for the most part, that word sales tax in Montana is a bad word. And I have not heard any support on the doors in the neighborhoods in Kalispell at this point in time, and I have to admit I have voted against it, and I've watched in the Senate when a local option sales tax. I think it died on a tie vote one time, and maybe in '03 or '05.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Next item, tax increment finance districts. They've been utilized by many communities around the state to help improve blighted areas, and some municipalities appear to have abused these rules. Do you believe the current tax increment finance laws are too lax or too permissive? And do you support their use by municipalities to redevelop blighted areas?
I have to admit, I don't know what the specific Montana TIF laws are. And in preparing for this, I did some research on TIF, and you can't really get a handle on what Montana TIF laws are or anything like that. So I'd be shooting myself in the foot if I tried to pretend to be an expert on that. You know, you used the word blight, and originally that's what it was intended for. What has happened, and I think what you're referring to, is that TIFs have become a scheme with sometimes unintended consequences, where you're giving a benefit to a developer, a specific developer, and cutting some tax rates over a 20, 30-year period, which can reduce your revenue for providing services for the general population. So I think if they are done honestly and with the right intentions, and understanding that you're taking a short-term gain for a long-term, perhaps unintended consequences that's going to shift the cost of the services to the everyday taxpayer, you know, that's something that just needs to be considered. And I will admit, I am not an expert on TIF law in Montana, and I hope my brain doesn't have those creases.
Bob, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are important issues that we face as a municipality, and not necessarily easy topics, as you admit. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents in November.
Thank you. Well, I think the most important thing that I have to offer is my experience. I was 4 years in the House. I spent 8 years and was termed out of the Montana State Senate. My second session in the Senate, I was chosen to be the chairman of the Finance and Claims Committee, and that became my work for the next 6 years. We had a $450 million deficit in '02 and '03, and we had a special session in August of '02, which we successfully balanced the budget, which is constitutionally mandated, and we didn't hurt people. I found enough bones buried in the backyard of state government to patch that together, which brought me to being selected to be president of the Senate in '03, where we had, you know, another $225 million deficit, and we were able again to balance the budget. So I have the experience. I was actually encouraged to run by some of my Democratic friends who have watched the Senate in the last session, and there was quite a bit of dysfunction and some fighting, and they suggested that I should run again. My 8-year term limits is up, and so I'm looking forward to going back and being a part of the game.
Great.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome.
And good luck in November. Now I have with me Daniel King, or Dan, running for Senate District 5.
Yes.
And you're a Democrat.
Yes.
And I would like to thank you for joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you for having me.
And we have a few questions for you that revolve around a few of the issues that we as city officials have to deal with on a
Okay.
regular basis.
Okay?
We're asking these questions so we get insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions in Helena that will impact our citizens.
Okay?
As a city, we're required to meet standards established by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and Montana Department of Environmental Quality, especially as they pertain to wastewater and stormwater discharge. We fully recognize and want and need to keep our environment clean. However, we're approaching a point where we're reaching diminishing returns at great financial cost. Do you believe the regulations we have in place at the state and federal level are appropriate, or have they gone too far? And what can you do in Helena to help us with this issue?
When you say gone too far, become too strict or restrictive for your actions that you want to take?
Essentially, the requirements have become so great that it's financially unfeasible for us to meet the requirements, to meet the standards that are being established.
So the city's opinion in that the standards are wrong and need to be changed, or too strict, or whatever word we want to use.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I think that I am certainly in favor of good environment and good environmental standards, but if they are restricting the city from doing things and if they're restricting the district from doing things, or the city from doing things that need to be done, then I think they need to be re-examined, certainly. They're always open for that.
Okay. The next question we have is about taxation. Right now, there are a few communities in Montana that have been given the ability to determine for themselves, as communities, whether or not a limited sales tax is an appropriate mechanism to finance infrastructure needs. This tax is only permitted in resort communities with populations under 5,500 residents. Given the limited ability for local governments to grow revenue, and in the face of increasing demands for service and infrastructure, especially as we look to the eastern side of Montana, would you consider giving other communities in Montana the option to explore a local option sales tax and decide for themselves whether or not this is a viable solution for funding infrastructure costs? Please explain.
Okay. I'm opposed to having those kinds of taxes available. I think that the non-tax in Montana was really an attractive feature when we moved to here. We retired to this area, was a non-tax. And I think that it would not be in the best interest to begin taxing for different spots, because people, I think the shoppers would avoid it personally. And so that's, in that reason, I would be against it. I know that we're dependent upon this seasonal shoppers, and as well as the Canadians who come all the time. And I think they come here for a reason. And we offer fine shopping, and there's a residual benefit for everybody when that occurs.
Okay.
Okay.
The next question I have is regarding tax increment financing. Make you aware, tax increment financing is used by municipalities to help rehabilitate blighted areas. These rules at times appear to have been abused by certain municipalities. Do you believe the tax increment finance rules are too permissive or too restrictive, and do you support their use by municipalities?
From what little I really know about them is I think they may be too lenient, or allowing the abuse of them in some cases that I've heard about anyway, and so they would not hurt them to be tightened up a bit. I do think that if you're going to use those kind of taxes, the people who are being affected should be asked how they feel about it, and then, but I have no objections if the money is closely guarded that you use those.
Okay. Dan, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening.
Okay.
Appreciate you showing up and answering our questions. Like I said before, these are important issues that you addressed, and we appreciate your candor. Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Okay. I am not a politician. I had a 40-year-plus career as an educator. I was a teacher, vice principal, high school principal, assistant superintendent, taught at the college level for 10 years, doing that kind of thing. So I'm not, I have a peripheral understanding of politics. I've been a volunteer, walked a lot for different people. My brother-in-law was mayor of San Bernardino, which is a large city in Southern California, and I probably should have listened to his lectures at the Thanksgiving table more than I did, or paid closer attention. But I wanted to, I am running as an alternative, as a Democratic alternative to the Republican candidate, because I feel as though they need an alternative. People, when I say they, the voters need I am for the raising the minimum wage. I'm for the expansion of Medicaid. I believe in those kind of things. I am against turning the federal lands over to the state. Those kind of things, that's where I stand. So, and lastly, I'm very supportive of the public school system. And so I think the voters of Montana, or voters of District 5, need to say, hey, there's an alternative to the other one. And that's why I'm running. Okay?
Dan, appreciate it. Thank you for
very
joining
much.
us. Good luck in November.
Thank you very much. Nice.
Okay, good evening. I have with me Stacy Schnabel. She is a candidate for county commissioner, running as a Democrat. I want to thank you for appearing in our local forum this evening.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Stacy, since Kalispell is a seat of our county government, we share many common issues. We have a couple of questions today for you that revolve around only a few of the key issues we face as elected city officials. We're asking these questions so we get insight on your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions as a county commissioner that will impact our citizens. First question I have is, how would you describe the current relationship between the Flathead County Commissioners and the city of Kalispell? And in what ways do you think the county commissioners can work more closely with our city?
I'm going to take notes over here.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Through my observation, I've spent a lot of time in commissioners' meetings, sitting in at all of 3 of the city council meetings. And, what I have observed is that the relationship is contentious at best. I see that there is not a lot of communication back and forth, and there's not a lot of respect. I see too much ego going on and not enough attention to the true issues at hand and due process being given to those issues. Moving forward, I think the best way to rectify that issue is to improve communication. That means that commissioners should attend council meetings. That means that commissioners should attend their board meetings. That is first and foremost the best way to tackle that problem. It is a big problem. Kalispell is the county seat, and so you have a really unique relationship here in that you don't have the ability to extricate yourselves from each other. So moving forward, that would be absolutely one of my priorities, is to improve communication amongst the governments.
Okay. As a Flathead County Commissioner, you represent all of the citizens in the county. Over the past 40 years, we have seen our industrial and timber tax base erode due to, but not limited to, environmental challenges and related uncertainty in utility, especially electric utility, costs. What tools does the county possess that you can utilize to promote new business development, and how will you use them?
Well, that's a very good question. And I answered this question in a very general way, in that, yes, the county should be as welcoming and conforming as possible to those industries. However, the way that I see the world is evolving, and this county needs to be anticipating future industries that may choose to locate here. It is definitely a challenge as our economy changes and as legislation changes and litigation changes the world that we're living in. But it is, I believe, the duty of the commissioners to be thinking ahead and thinking far out into the future and doing what we can to be anticipating those changes and doing everything we can to be welcoming to businesses so we can keep our economy thriving here.
Okay, thank you. Third, there's been recent discussion regarding the redesign of the couplet around the county courthouse. How do you think the county courthouse and the proposed campus should integrate with the downtown planning efforts Kalispell is undertaking right now?
When I look at this couplet issue, I'm glad you asked me this question, because I see the revitalization of downtown Kalispell to be, it's on the up and up. It's definitely on the upswing. And the best way to continue to revitalize your downtown is probably to avoid moving both of those lanes to one side of the historic courthouse and expanding that to 4 lanes. There are many ways to go about dealing with the couplet, and of course there are 3 different interests in mind here: the county, the city, and also the Department of Transportation. I don't see an immediate need here to expand to 4 lanes. In fact, I think expanding to 4 lanes is going to impair the ability of downtown Kalispell to prosper and be friendly to pedestrian traffic.
Okay, thank you. Stacey, I want to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are important issues that you've addressed, and we appreciate your candor. If elected in November, we look forward to working with you and maybe having you attend our meetings in the future. But please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Thanks for the opportunity to do that. Communication is key to me. The reason I'm running for county commissioner is to reconnect the citizens with the government. And that means that our commissioner needs people skills to work with constituents, management skills to work with county people and department heads. I'm also running because I believe in fair and equal representation. That means not just business owners and property owners. That means that people who today are not owning businesses and property will someday, and we need to be looking to what is going to happen here in the future and be welcoming to all of the ideas that come to the table. And thirdly, I believe it is the county's duty to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people here in this county who are paying the taxes and also living here. And so that means to me that the services are as important as the dollars we're spending on them. We can work together innovatively and collaboratively to build a brighter future for Flathead County.
Stacey, thank you, and good luck in November.
Thank you very much.
Okay. With me now, I have Republican candidate for County Commissioner, Phil Mitchell. Phil, welcome.
Thank you for
joining us this
having me
evening.
here tonight, very much.
Since
I was
Kalispell,
going to say I'm the last one.
You're the last one.
I slept for a little while.
did you?
Yeah.
I didn't.
Okay, all right.
I'm just reading blind,
Okay,
literally.
all right.
Since Kalispell is the seat of our county government,
Okay,
we share many common issues. We have a couple questions today for you that revolve around only a few of these key issues.
okay,
We're asking these questions so we get insight into your thoughts and opinions on these topics, so we can understand how you may make decisions as a county commissioner that will impact our citizens. How would you describe the current relationship between the Flathead County Commissioners and the City of Kalispell? And in what ways do you think the county commissioners can work more closely with the city?
I do not know how I think you guys are getting along fine. I'm just, because I'm from Whitefish, I just finished up my stint at Whitefish City Council. I know how we shouldn't do it, and I could talk about that for a minute. Real quickly, with the City Council, Whitefish and County Commissioners, we just finished our donut lawsuit, and the City of Whitefish lost. And just know that we went through 4 years of difficult time, and I think we tried. We spent a year and a half doing negotiations with the county, and we ended up going to Supreme. We had a referendum which took out the year and a half's worth of work, and we went to the Supreme Court. So I don't want to delve into that any further. To me, that's not how you work with a county. I think the cities can work with each other. I mean, my wish in Whitefish, I voted no on all this stuff, was to be able to say, can we sit down and talk with the county face to face, and can we come up with solutions for the donut? And if you know me at all, with my background is I spent a lot of time in golf course developments, and I dealt with people all the time on contracts, and you solve things face to face, and then you live with the results of it. And it has been very successful for me, and that's how I would deal with working with Kalispell City Council, whether it's Kalispell, whether it's Columbia Falls, whether it's Whitefish, is the county need to show respect for the cities, and what are their wishes? I mean, you could do a bullet list once a year. What are your wishes for us to accomplish together, and then figure out a way to do it.
Okay. As a Flathead County Commissioner, you represent all of the citizens in the county. Over the past 40 years, we've seen our industrial and timber tax base erode due to, but not limited to, environmental challenges and related uncertainty in utility costs. What tools does the county possess that you can utilize to promote new business development, and how will you use them?
I think there's a couple ways you could maybe do this. Montana West and the Flathead County Economic Development is working with you guys in trying to get rid of your Central Railroad District, your one strip through there of one track, and move it out toward Evergreen and have a business district out there. I was sorry to see you guys didn't receive your grant, or the county didn't receive the grant, or the economic department didn't receive their grant to move ahead with some utility work. And my understanding is it's maybe going to be slowed down a little bit, but I think if you can supply a business area for a bigger business amount of people, and provide a space for them, I think that'll work. I did talk with Kelly Danielson. I just finished going through the proof, I'm not a gun, proof gun facility. We have a number of them in the valley now. And her comment was most people that bring in, say, 50 or less employees, they want the owner, the CEO want to live in this area, so they choose to live here. And so we need to, be nice to the people that come and visit here, because some of these people do have an awful lot of businesses that are under 50 employees, and if they choose to live here, Whitefish has grown substantially with a number of wealthy people, and they brought a number of businesses here. So I think you can do that. I think you also can, my understanding is there's going to be an expansion at the Teletech for a number of employees. I think it's a heck of a starting place for someone to start a business. We also need people from all pay grades. We can't have all high-paying jobs, so I think Teletech is doing a good job helping us here. Just know that, throughout Montana, there's an awful little communities that are similar to us, and we have to try to promote something that we're special, and I think we do in Flathead Valley have it already. You just get up each morning and walk around and look around, so and we have it.
Okay. Third, there's been recent discussion regarding the redesign of the couplet around the county courthouse. Do you think the county courthouse and the proposed campus should integrate with the downtown planning efforts Kalispell is undertaking right now?
Yes, when I was in the primary, I talked to Pam Kennedy, but I think she has a different last name now. She asked me about this, and I just told her, I said, there's two different designs. One is the roads are on both sides, which they presently are. You make them 2 lanes on both sides, or you move it all over to one side. There's pluses and minuses for it. The one would be helpful for the county in terms of a campus facility as they're expanding over there. The downside is that there could be a cost issue to move it all 4 lanes to one side. I think a way to resolve this again is, as I talked about a minute ago, sit down with the city of Kalispell. What are their wishes? What do they want through town? What do they envision the state, I believe it's a state highway, I'm not sure, I believe it is, Highway 93 is a state highway. You must include them, and see what their wishes are. I mean, I would think that they would have an awful lot of pull on it, but if the county and the city can come up with a plan through town and around the courthouse, I think we need to honor both sides of that, because it does affect city of Kalispell. It affects the south end of your town, and I think you guys should have a good ability to help tell us what your wishes are, and I would hopefully it'd be the wishes of most of the voters.
Okay. Phil, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening and answering our questions. These are important issues that you've addressed, and we appreciate your candor.
Thank you.
Please close with a short reason why you should receive the vote from our constituents.
Oh, I think a couple reasons. I am the Republican candidate for the county commissioner job. I think probably one of the biggest things I've learned real quick is that I've learned what Republicans stand for, and some of those issues are trying to create business, trying to create capitalism. I'm a true person. I've talked to several people today who have businesses, and how can they expand? How can they do it? And I do enjoy that. That's what I did for my life. I think we need to hold our government accountable, and I think we need as much government as we need and not anymore. I'm not a person who wants expansion. But real quickly, spent 10 years in public service already, 6 years at Whitefish School Board, 4 years City Council in Whitefish, and I think most of you know that can be very demanding. We'll say that. It's very It was difficult, being a conservative. I am a conservative. I will try to, with my Christian walk, try to ask people to hold me accountable. I'm not going to say something different next week than I did last week. It's just not who I am. I am also very well knowledgeable in terms of budgets. I was a person who met with our budget director in Whitefish, and I probably was the one who know the budget the most. So the qualifications and understanding budgets are probably the two of the biggest things, and I want to do it.
Okay.
There we go.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great.
All righty.
Thank you, and good
Thank
luck in
you.
November.
All righty, thank you.
Okay. In closing, I'd like to close this up. I want to, one, thank all of our candidates for appearing this evening and speaking to the public, speaking to us. We did invite all of the candidates that are running that will be voted for out of the city of Kalispell. We had a few who could not attend due to scheduling conflicts. And I want to close with a couple of quick comments, though. You know, we as a city of Kalispell, we have adopted a legislative agenda. We, as a council, have agreed that local control is what we like to see. We do not like to see things handed upon from up high. We believe in some of the old Ronald Reagan philosophy. Let's push government down to the lowest level, to the citizens where the laws are impacting them. And that's largely where our legislative agenda is grounded. We decided to address this because we wanted to have a bigger voice. We thought there was an important for the elected officials of Kalispell to be your voice in Helena and to be your voice in Washington, D.C. As I've said before, before I was mayor, I would call Washington, D.C., and I would try to talk to a senator, and I would never get a call back. I would call Helena, and I could never get a call back. Now, as the mayor, I make a phone call. I call Senator Tester's office. They answer the phone. What can I do for you, Mayor Johnson? So I want to use that ability to represent you, the citizens of Kalispell, and voice your concerns to Helena, to Washington, D.C., and to try to make a better world for Kalispell. This is the ultimate goal as elected officials, and I've said it many times before. I may ask questions that are unpopular, that challenge. They may not necessarily be my belief. There's times I like to be the devil's advocate, because in the long run, when I see my children sitting at this table, maybe as mayor, maybe as a representative in Helena, and they're 45 years old, 20 years from now, I want them to look back and say, you know, my dad and that council made wise decisions. They asked tough questions, they held people accountable, and they held themselves accountable. You know, one of the things that we heard this evening was local option sales tax, and some of the questions about that. Would the city really give back if we had a sales tax? You know, one of the things that we talked about as a council, if we were given the opportunity as a city to evaluate this tax, would we give something back to the residents of Kalispell? It would be our intention to do that. This is exhibited last night when we looked at the funding for the 911 center. We know that the funding for this 911 center is critical. It serves all of the community of Flathead County. Because we fund part of that community, or part of the operations of that center out of our city budget, we signed a resolution of intent last night that we will give back to the taxpayers of Kalispell for the amount of money that we were funding the 911 center. So we are putting it in black and white. We are holding ourselves accountable. That is a promise from us to you that as we find replacement funding mechanisms, we will not just continue to tax to grow the beast that is local government. We want to control local government, and we want to give you the best services that you deserve as citizens of Kalispell. With that, I thank you for joining us this evening and look forward to serving you in the future.